Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video and Blind Woman reviews, and we're back to Sarah J. Maas, and I am reviewing Tower of Dawn. Yes, Tower of Dawn. I'm going to talk about this again, but in a little bit in the reading order. But yes, expect spoilers, especially for the previous series, for the previous books. Maybe a little bit for this, but just expect spoilers in general. Yeah, just expect spoilers because this has a lot. And yeah, anyway, so Kale Westfall and Nezrin Falik, I like her last name, have arrived in the shining city of Antica to forge an alliance with the Kogan of the southern continent, whose vast armies are Aurelia's last hope. But they have also come to Antica for another purpose, to seek healing at famed Torre Chesme, for the wounds Kale received in Rifthold. After enduring unspeakable horrors as a child, Irene Towers has no desire to help the young lord from Otterland, let alone heal him, yet she has sworn an oath to assist those in need. Okay, wait a minute. To assist those in need, and will honor it. Okay, guys, give me a second. You know what? I'm just gonna leave it like this because this will be better. And we'll honor it. Okay. But Lord Westfall carries shadows from his own past, and Irene soon comes to realize they could engulf them both. In this sweeping parallel novel to the New York Times best-selling Empire of Storms, Kale, Nezrin, and Irene will have to draw on every scrap of their resilience if they wish to save their friends. But while they become entangled in the political webs of the cognate, deep in the shadows of mighty mountains where warriors soar on legendary rooks, long-awaited answers slumber. Answers that might offer their world a chance at survival or doom them all. Okay, so as the description has said, this is a parallel novel to Empire of Storms. So I will say this in the Kingdom of Ash review, but I'm gonna say this again. If I wouldn't suggest that you read Kingdom of Ash without reading Tower of Dawn, because Tower of Dawn is integral to Kingdom of Ash in that, since it happens at the same time as Empire of Storms and provides some needed information to continue reading. So for the rest of the book, so I would definitely suggest that you not read this without reading Kingdom of Ash without reading this book. So I love this book a lot. I do, and this is where I feel something very interesting. A couple of very interesting things kind of occurred. So I loved it. The writing awesome. The romance, I definitely like the romance between Irene and Kale, although honestly, I somehow feel Irene still deserves better. But you know what? Our queen chose Kale, and Kale should feel honored that our queen chose him. Because Irene is a queen, and Kale's just Kale. So yeah, he should feel honored that a queen chose him, honestly. And it Another way that I feel like this book parallels to, that you can kind of tell that this book sort of parallels to Empire of Storms, besides the fact that you get kind of some information on Empire of Storms, like the news that's happening and Kale receives it, is kind of like the ending after at the end. I will say that. So for now, this is also where we talk about Irene, right? So I believe I mentioned Irene when I was talking about the Assassin's Blade. By the way, if you have not seen my previous reviews on Throne of Glass, check out the description because there is a link, as always, and to the playlist, because this is important. So nothing. Here's what I've learned from reading Sarah J. Maas. Nothing she writes is or should be pushed aside, no matter how little, no matter how insignificant it feels at the time. Nothing that Sarah J. Maas writes is insignificant. Everything has some form of meaning. And because of that, it's interesting when you read a series, or it's like the big one really, this series, Throne of Glass. When you read Throne of Glass, and the smallest thread that you totally forgot about, and the smallest thing, the thing that you found super insignificant, comes right back, and it's right back at you, and you're just like, oh my god, like this is coming back, right? So it is an interesting thing how the smallest insignificant thing, or seems to be insignificant, comes back in Throne of Glass. And Irene Towers is a really good example. Irene, we first meet her in The Assassin and the Healer, where Aelin is basically kind of on a 2-day break, I guess, while she waits for her ship to go to the Silent Assassins, and she works there. Um, and she works there as a barmaid, I guess. I think that's what they call them. And basically, she works there, and um, her whole thing is she works there. She's trying to get money to go to the Torre Chesme, as it's pronounced in that thing. I'm gonna talk about that name in a little bit, but basically, she's trying to raise money from there, and she's about to be assaulted by a couple of guys, and then Aelin swoops in and kills them and defends her and stuff like that. And she ends up teaching Irene self defense maneuvers. And by the end, Aelin gives her a bunch of money as well as a ruby brooch. And she left her a note that says, for wherever you need to go and then some, the world needs more healers. She never put in a name, she never put in that. Those are the only two lines that she has written, that she wrote in the note, and she left it anonymous. And then Aelin, as Selena at the time, just left. Irene never learned her name, but after receiving that, she left. She left that in the city, or like the small town they were in, is called Inish, but in the books. And from there, she just left, and she ended up making a long trip where she walked, maybe even bought a ship or whatever, to the southern continent. And basically, she begged to be taught there, and was even willing to pay for, and was saying, like, all the money that she gained was going to be for this. But she also learned from the healer on high that nothing that Silva, the goddess of healing, gives, she gives it for free. So why should they charge for something that Silva gives them for free? So, but what they asked Irene to do, however, is to is there anything like that she can offer. And she said, she can clean, she can do laundry. She's like, anything else, because there are people that already do that. And she said that there's someone that taught her self-defense, and she started teaching the women of her school, of the Torre Chesme, self-defense in exchange for being tutored. And anyone, once a week, acolytes, healers, young, old, they can learn self-defense with her and learn the techniques that Aelin taught her to defend herself. I thought this was glorious and amazing and beautiful and so 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 great. You just know it. It's just awesome, right? It's just good. And it was a good this is where the smaller thing comes in. And then she ends up meeting Kale, who another he is kind of like another small thread that leads to Aelin, because him and Aelin had a bit of a relationship and they were lovers. They were lovers, as well as her and Dorian, but I like a bunch of this stuff seems to connect to Aelin in some way, and it's just interesting. Um, and she ended up, Kale goes, and at first, yes, Irene is completely against helping him because he's the captain of the guard of the king and stuff like that. But eventually, she kind of just or was anyway. Eventually, though, she realizes that there are that he was a child too. But when her own village was and Fanhero was well, not her village, but her mother was killed and everything. So she does end up helping them, and they kind of they start gaining a friendship. Except their friendship, as great as it is, there are days that Kale has bad days, and he's an asshole toward Irene. That's what I'm saying. That our queen deserves better, but no, she chose him. Our queen chose him, so we will go with it. I still love their romance though. So, but he still has bad days, and he's kind of an asshole to her, and releases his anger at her. But she also did the same in the very beginning. So they kind of both, sometimes when they have bad days in the books, do kind of do unwanted do and say unwanted things, mainly say unwanted things. And I so it was but they still became friends, and they still kind of started understanding each other. Although Irene warns him that his healing, as painful as it is, it's also going to be emotionally painful if he cannot and and he has to deal with his emotions, and she tries to kind of get him to deal with his emotions, and he doesn't want to. It's like, I already dealt with it and stuff like that. And it's like, but something, it was already, feeding the darkness in him. So it's kind of like physical healing, but also emotional healing, which I thought was very interesting to follow. And I also love Nezrin and Sartak's romance. It's kind of adorable. And the way that the politics is set up is that there are siblings, but there haven't been any. They haven't, like, the guy that I choose, the Coggin chooses his heir, but and it's not like firstborn gets the kingdom, but basically he chooses his heir, and then but also there are times where their siblings are constantly competing against each other to become the Coggin's heir, and there was even history where they basically killed each other as well. So, and the rule was that if a sibling became the ruler, it's that in order to not get competition from other, so that their heirs don't get any other competition, every other sibling, if they're still alive, would be made infertile. So that was a thing. But there's a bit of a change in this one, because although the siblings constantly compete, there are some that aren't constantly competing. Like, for example, there's Caution, who doesn't compete with his siblings, but is very loyal to his father and follows his orders. And then there's Argon, who just, I don't know what to say about him. He's just annoying, honestly. Then there's like sweet faced Juva, who just got married. She just wanted an arranged marriage. She's like, I don't want to play the games at court, and she did that. Then there's Hazar, who's constantly competing, but was also one of Irene's first friends when she arrived at the southern continent, as well as Caution, who later revealed his feelings toward her, which she did not return. And then there's Tumaloon, who unfortunately actually died by the time they reached the southern continent. And you don't, that nobody, Caution suspects that Tumaloon was killed, even though it says she committed suicide and she was reckless and wild and everything. So there is a lot that is that is happening in the political intrigue is definitely very exciting when it comes to the southern continent. I do enjoy it. But I love the character development even more. And this is when they find out all about Maeve. Maeve was originally thought to be a Fae queen, and she made herself a Fae queen, and she ended up, you know, um, according to the stories, I think if I remember correctly, in Heir of Fire, she was she was basically the oldest sister, um, and she ruled alongside Mab and Mora, and they basically ruled alongside Maeve. But while Mab and Mora died, Maeve continued to rule. Um, Maeve continued to rule Dornell, uh, unchallenged because she was the oldest sister and she lived much longer than her. But we find out, while Nazarene is on a quest to find answers that might help Otterland defeat the Vogue, that Maeve is not Fae. Maeve is a Vogue queen. And she ended up traveling there along with her most loyal handmaidens, known as the Karen Kui, which were basically known as the Stygian spiders. And she ended up traveling there, um, and went to the world and left the Karen Kui to guard um the arch, and basically they were all waiting for their queen to call them, because they're her most loyal handmaidens, stuff like that. And and so on and so forth. But basically she ended up traveling there, and she ripped into the memories of Mora, Mab, and pretty much everybody in Dornell, and tricked them into believing that there was an older sister who ruled alongside them. And that is how she kind of got with the Fae, and ended up being queen of the Fae, as well as ruler of such an army. And she prepared for the arrival um of the Vogue kings, including her husband, because she married one of the Vogue kings at the time, and usually the most powerful. But yeah, she got bored with his conquest and wanted something of her own. So that is what she ended up doing, and that is what they find out. And before it all kind of went the way that it did. And from that, now they have that information, they plan to kind of take it and give it to, Aelin and their friends back there, and all that, and all the fun stuff. So that is what they plan to do. Meanwhile, there is someone killing healers. And now that is another mystery that comes up, and you find out exactly who it is, and that they're hunting Irene. And it turns out it is a Vogue princess who took over Duva's body. And Duva was basically was the one that killed Tumaloon, but not willingly. And it's interesting to see that, and it's interesting to see Hazar kind of go from going all political, and Irene's hard to deal with friend, to at the end, she's like, she'll fight for Irene's land and help Irene, in saying that she fights for her sisters, both dead and alive. And she wants to fight so that her sister Duva doesn't have to look over her shoulder in fear anymore. And at first, Kale was like, in his head, basically, like, he thought, except to be afraid of, the siblings. And Hazar said, no, never her. Everybody kind of made an agreement that no matter how much competition they were in, Duva would not be hurt, because she's kind of like the sweet one, the one that they all protected, because she's the best. Hazar literally called her the best of me, like she's like the best part of her. So everyone kind of made a pact, a sibling pact, that Duva herself would not be harmed, and that she would be protected by them, no matter how much competition and how much scheming they did against each other. Which makes sense why she was allowed to technically keep her baby, in a way. And in since an heir, and then at the end, Sartak found, he wants Nesrin to be his bride, but his father at first was not as as happy, and because she's not of noble blood, but he said that if that was what it took to be heir, and also not showing much love to his siblings, he didn't want to be. And then the king announced that Sartak he was already chosen to be his heir. So Nesrin technically will be his empress. Another thing I found is that exploration of Nesrin's character is very interesting, because one of the things that I like is that technically the southern continent is Nesrin's original home. She is an immigrant from the southern continent, but she was living in Otterland. Her father. Wait, was there a father? No, her father. Yeah, her father was from the southern continent, and her mother was from Otterland. But they ended up staying in Otterland, even though even her mother was like, let's get out of here and let's move to the southern continent. They ended up staying there. And basically, she is an immigrant, and because of that, she suffered a lot of different things. She suffered a couple of things in Otterland, including she mentions in Queen of Shadows that the reason she became a city guard was to stop was like the reason she decided to become a city guard was the moment like she realized that guards wouldn't stop the people when they were throwing stones at her as an immigrant. So she became kind of like a city guard in a way to protect those who were being bullied, I guess you can say, by the natives of that, or not really natives, but like I guess the natives people in general in Otterland. And like she said that she decided to become a city guard because the guards themselves wouldn't stop these things from happening to her, and she, I guess, wanted to stop them herself. And at the end of Queen of Shadows, I mean, she became uh captain of the guard, but now and now she fell in love with a prince who will eventually become emperor. And it's lovely. It's an interesting thing, and I like the also like progression to Irene when she and Kale kind of ended up together in the thread that kind of leads to Aelin. It was very interesting. Another thing I found very interesting is that her name is uh Towers. Her last name is Towers, and the the school name is called the Torre Chesme, and Torre is spelled Torre, and that specifically in Spanish means tower. It does mean tower. Torre means tower in Spanish, and Torre basically translates to tower. So yeah, just thought I would say that. I would mention that. So I found that kind of interesting that her name is Towers, while well, if you want to say like the singular of tower is torre in Spanish, while the plural for towers being the plural, and her last name is Torres in Spanish. So it's something that I found very interesting, and I really want to know if she had some form of, if Sarah J. Maas had something with that, because I loved looking into that, and I was like, wait, really? And it is called Tower of Dawn, I guess, because even at the end of it, like the only way I can think of Tower of Dawn as a title is that the there is finally like Irene has been studying for 2 years, and she does become heir apparent to the healer on high, but also she now, oh, hold on a second. Okay, so my second half got deleted, or my second part of this got deleted, so I'm re-recording this. But anyway, so she became, Irene technically became Healer on High, or not Healer on High, but like the heir apparent to Healer on High. So I'm kind of wondering if like the whole Tower of Dawn thing was kind of like her reaching that position and like that level of experience, and it's like I can now go into the world I left and help people, because Tower could probably be, her last name Towers, but also I'm wondering more about I'm wondering that because I don't see a way that it connects to Kale, unless you want to say that, he finally kind of dealt with a lot of his issues as a kid, because his dad was a jerk, as well as you can say he had he had these issues and he had to deal with, but he also got healed. And I guess he also reached kind of his dawn as well, and like he found love and all the very fun stuff. I don't know too much how it kind of works out, unless like um since the sun rises on east and kind of sets on west, I kind of wonder if like it's a whole play on Irene kind of being the more like the one that's a little bit happier. She's kind of like she can be negative, but she's also the one that definitely brings joy to Kale's life, while Kale can be like the the other person that she sees at the end of the day. I don't know. It's an interesting play on words. I feel Tower of Dawn. Um, another way that I feel like this really parallels to something interesting that Sergeant Maas did at the end. Also happens is something that she also does in a lot of her later books, or not a lot of them, just in A Court of Thorns and Roses at least, and I also will say later books because of Kingdom of Ash, but she does in Kingdom of Ash, but she's doing it here as well, and that is life binding. And basically, by the end, Kale is healed, but he almost dies protecting Irene because of Duva / the Vogue Princess. Really, I'm gonna say the Vogue Princess because Duva did this unwillingly and didn't even know what was happening. But basically, he pretty much is about to die. The damage is too great for her to heal, but she kind of bargains, and she ends up, binding Kale's life to hers. And the way it's gonna work is that if she is extremely tired and has used her magic for a while, he won't be able to he will have to eventually go use a cane or a chair for the rest of his life, because she kind of made the sacrifice and she bound his life to hers, but also, or her life to his, but also when one of them dies, the other will die as well. So this thing kind of comes up later in Sarah J. Maas's writing in A Court of Thorns and Roses, and in Kingdom of Ash as well, but we'll discuss that in the Kingdom of Ash review because of course we will. So yeah, it is a lot to it is definitely a lot to like look at, because I feel like it's something that she brings up, and I don't have too many thoughts on that. But I just thought I'd bring that up. And also, I really enjoyed the ending, which definitely you can see the parallel between Empire of Storms and Tower of Dawn, when basically Irene tells Kale the story of how she ended up at some point in the you know, in the Torre Chesme and in the southern continent, and it kind of ends with them on a ship, and he reads the note that she was going to get rid of, because the reason she kept Aylin's note is because it gave her courage for the last 2 years, and she was going to, and she was going to get rid of it. She's like, I guess I don't need it anymore. I did what I needed to do. And Kale read the note, and he decided he kind of ends with him crying a little and saying, I have a story. Keep that for a little bit longer. There's gonna be someone who want to see it. And she basically ended up he it kind of ends with him about to tell her the story of Aelin and all that stuff. But then I didn't see it the first time I read it, because the first time I read it from a free library for the blind, and for some reason they didn't have this part at the end of the audiobook. But basically, at least not that I remember, but the audible version has it. But basically, after that, it shifts to Aylin's point of view in the Iron Box. So before I continue, if you may not remember the ending of Empire of Storms, basically Aelin kind of, it ends with Aelin being taken by Maeve in exchange to save Elite's life, and she was also whipped and everything. But she was whipped, she was beaten. And then by the end, when the army was coming, Aelin was placed in an iron box or a coffin, whatever you really want to call it. But she was placed in this place, and there's an iron mask to her face, there are iron chains, basically all not to use her magic, and she was put in this iron box and taken by Maeve. And this was also when Rowan kind of found out that, Aelin is his mate, and Lysandra ends up pretending to be Aelin, as was their plan. Aedion was also mad at Lysandra and Aelin because they made this plan. But basically, that it kind of shifts to Aelin's point of view, where she is in the box, and it kind of ends with Maeve saying, "Oh, good, you're awake. Let's begin." So yeah, if that does not convince you that this is parallel to Empire of Storms, I don't know what else will, but definitely read Tower of Dawn before Kingdom of Ash. It is important that you do, I feel, and it'll give the story more context, especially when if you don't read it and you just see Chaol and Irene together and you can't remember Irene. And if you can't read Assassin's Blade, because she's definitely there, definitely read Assassin's Blade as well before Tower of Dawn. But you don't want to kind of go in Kingdom of Ash kind of like blanking on context, because in Tower of Dawn they get married in this book. That Irene and Chaol get married. So when she's introduced as Lady Westfall, you're like, oh wow, how come he is like, because in Empire of Storms he's not there. In Queen of Shadows he was kind of taken away. He was on his way to Antarctica, right? So at the end of Queen of Shadows. So when we don't want it, you don't want to kind of go in and not realize what's happening, and then at the end you're like, oh, how is it that he's now going with these people with the southern continent, and there's like no news about it, and like there's no explanation, and that is because you should have read Tower of Dawn. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts on Tower of Dawn. I love it, and I can't wait to review Kingdom of Ash for you guys. Oh, Kingdom of Ash, that was a lot. It was great, but I'm gonna guys, enjoy the let me know what you think, and until next time, which should be tomorrow, happy reading.
Voiceover unmuted. Mute button. 0% on a slider. Stop recording button.